Welcome to Money and Purpose, a podcast exploring how to optimize your personal finances and align your money with what is most important to you. I'm your host, Marianne Poon, CFA charterholder and financial advisor. Joining me today is Tiffanie Purvis, General Counsel and a Senior Philanthropic Advisor at the Greater Washington Community Foundation. Tiffanie helps families and their advisors craft gift-giving strategies that are both tax-savvy and personally meaningful. Tiffanie, thank you so much for being on the show and for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
A lot of families know national platforms like Fidelity and Schwab's donor advised funds. So what's the difference when they work with a community foundation?
Sure. So what sets us apart really is the community aspect. Oftentimes, donors will come to a community foundation because their philanthropy is focused locally. And even as a community foundation, around 77% of our grants that we make or that are recommended stay right here in our local footprint. So that's Washington, D.C., Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and Northern Virginia. Of course, donors can donate locally, nationally, even internationally in some cases. But why community foundation is because they know that we have the expertise to think about how do we support our nonprofits locally and being able to act as a liaison for them with some of our nonprofit partners as well. So they like that connectivity to their neighbors, to their community, and then supporting their own backyards, front yards, side yards, right? For example, I'll tell you a story. I was at an event that we were hosting, and I was introducing one of my fund holders to another, and he looked at me and he said, "Tiffanie, we're neighbors."
I love that.
Yeah, and so we were at this event and they ran into each other, not knowing that they were mutual fund holders. They're like, "Oh, we're neighbors." And so it's that kind of connectivity that really does set us apart.
Right. So it truly is a community foundation.
And we actually just finished up a campaign for economic mobility called our Together We Prosper campaign. And really what we did was we looked at our community and we looked at the cross sections between those who were in most need, where we could make the highest impact. We launched our program called Brilliant Futures, which is a children's savings account program. And currently it's being piloted in 2 schools, one in Montgomery County, one in Prince George's County. And it provides a $1,000 reward into the fund each year. And upon graduation, that is the trigger to be able to receive the funds. Upon graduation, the student can receive it for continued education. They can receive it to start a retirement account because, we probably will need to start saving early.
Yes.
They can use it as a down payment. We always say probably, I don't know if we could do it in DC, but maybe on a little condo out and I don't know, in the suburbs.
Or rent deposit.
Right. Yeah, rent deposit, or to use it to start a business, get a little food truck or something. But it just gives them a little bit it gives them an opportunity to dream, to think about something, past high school, that they have a little bit of a nest egg to use and continue to grow, be wonderful, amazing human beings. And so it's hope for us, and it's hope for students who oftentimes don't know what they'll be doing, once they finish high school. The other is around our Guaranteed Basic Income program to support seniors, and then also for young people that are emerging out of the foster care system, just to give them some support as they're emerging back into community and building and figuring out lives, for themselves. Lastly is around supporting our community wealth building, which is around supporting small business within our region. So we're really excited and we're thrilled that we had a successful campaign to really support these initiatives, in addition to thinking through endowment growth and how legacy can support endowment over time as well.
Right. That sounds like a wonderful program. I love the kids' savings, of course. And that has young people thinking about money from an early age,
Yeah, it does. Because, there'll be some services around as we think about financial learning and what that looks like, and, as some key trigger points along your journey. So.
Right. And that's another benefit of the community foundation, is that what is needed the most, right? We've spoken before about disaster relief or, things that unexpectedly happen that require money, and you're there to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's what also makes this unique is that oftentimes, with the crisis response, when unfortunately tragedy happens in our region, we're able to be a source to where funds can go, and we're able to do the grant making to support those who have experienced that tragedy. And we're able to move quickly and convene quickly. We raised money during COVID. We were the fund that handled 9/11 and having the fund to support victims of 9/11 recently, and with the DCA crash as well. We were the community foundation that held that fund to be able to support the families of the victims. So when we think about crisis response, community foundations are in the center of that, wherever they are in various locations. And oftentimes, as community foundations, if it is in more than one area, we'll even partner together and work together to sustain our prospective communities.
So I guess, does the community serve all donor amounts?
So our start to open a donor advised fund, for example, or a fund is around $10,000 at the community foundation. Each community foundation might have their own minimums, but on average, it's around 10,000 or so for community foundations. And so starting at that point, and then going up from there, pretty much open from any size from 2,000 and up. So
Right.
well, we deal in assets from real estate to life insurance to gifts of bequest from wills and trusts, so you name it.
Right. And that's one advantage of doing community foundation is you can donate like complex assets like real estate. What's the most interesting asset somebody has donated? I'm just curious.
Oh my goodness. This job, I did have the opportunity to work with a donor who donated letters that were from Stephen Hawking.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so we were able to actually auction those off and then set up an endowment for theoretical physics.
Oh, amazing.
So that was really, really cool. I think that's in my career, that's probably been the coolest gift that I had the opportunity to work on.
Wow, that's incredible. I would love to challenge our listeners to come up with the most creative way of gifting. I'm sure people have really interesting things to donate, right?
Because a lot of people forget about tangible personal property, which is in essence what this was, right?
Right.
So if you don't no longer want those things, but you want them to be used to support the nonprofits that you care about, that's something to think about. Don't forget about the tangible personal property that you might have sitting in your home, right? So you never know what you might have of value that can support your charitable goals.
Right. What a wonderful story. So donors often ask whether they should set up a private foundation or a donor advised fund or a scholarship fund or any of the other myriad of ways that they can give. So how do you help them sort out, which is the best option and what's the right fit for them?
Sure. So it really depends on their needs. I work specifically and with legacy giving with our donor base and so or a fund holder base. And so I oftentimes ask, well, do you want family to be involved? Are you supporting specific charities? Do you know the areas that you want to support? And so that helps to inform some of the fund types that we have to determine what is the best route to go. So for example, if I'm working with a potential fund holder and, they say, well, I want to leave a bequest in my will. I want my grandchildren to know what it feels like to be involved in philanthropy, and I want them to give back. Then they might set up a donor advised fund in which their grandchildren, when they're of age, of course, can become fund advisors and decide to make grants out of that fund. Or say if there might be a donor who comes to me and says, Tiffanie, I love the arts. I love the youth and working with arts with youth. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what nonprofits are doing that. I just know that I like it. Do you know nonprofits that are working in this space? And I'll say, yeah, we can look at nonprofits that are focused on the arts and focused on working with the youth and determine which nonprofits, we can make grants to. You don't have to actually know the exact nonprofits. And then there's some, they know exactly what they want to do. They know exactly, what nonprofits they want to support, and they can list out those nonprofits and we can set up a fund that helps us to grant out to the nonprofits of the donor's choice and recommendation.
Wonderful. I love that you can guide people towards what's important to them. So as a financial advisor, I have to ask, what are the most powerful tax advantage strategies you see people using? And what are some things that people often overlook?
Sure. So giving during lifetime, there's always two that I like to make sure that we acknowledge. And one is, of course, giving through qualified charitable distribution because of that benefit. Of course, you cannot give a QCD or qualified charitable distribution to a donor advised fund. However, you can give them to other funds or community foundations, such as the Field of Interest Fund, where I mentioned that the donor doesn't need to know the exact organization, but may know the field that they want to support, or to a designated fund or to a scholarship fund, for example. So there's other funds that donors can give to through a qualified charitable distribution. But that is one way because in essence, the grant can be made either directly to the community foundation or it can be made directly to the nonprofits of their choice to support their work. And it helps to, in a sense, quote unquote, bypass, the taxes. They don't have to take that as income because it's going directly to the organization itself.
Right.
Right. And another is, and sometimes people forget, is around appreciated securities. Having that dual tax benefit to where you made a donation directly to the organization and you don't have to worry about the capital gains, and you get a fair market value deduction for the gift that's made directly to the organization for the stock. So those are two tax advantage ways that donors can think about giving now to support their organizations. Because a lot of times we think about our discretionary checkbook or our savings account, and that's how we need to give through. But there's other ways to use your assets to be able to support the charities of choice. And then another one I'll say is cryptocurrency. And it's not as much mentioned, but it's an option. Like for instance, at Community Foundation, we have a wonderful vendor that we work with to be able to accept it. Other nonprofits do, I'm sure, as well. So it's something to think about if you have money that's just kind of sitting in a crypto wallet and you want to give back and support charity as well.
So when an advisor brings in a client and comes with you, what does a successful collaboration look like?
Sure. So I really leave it up to my advisor partner in the sense of I have some advisors that'll say, Tiffanie, I'm working on this will, or I'm updating, this financial plan, or we're looking at giving for the year. They're interested in learning more about a donor advised fund. They're interested in learning more around how they can incorporate their charities in their overall estate plans. Can you have a conversation, with them around what they would like to do philanthropically, and then do whatever paperwork you all need to do, and then let me know.
Nice.
What you come up with, and then I could talk about it, at that time. So that tends to be the normal way. And I appreciate that because that means that our advisors trust us with their clients, and being able to have that conversation and really think thoughtfully through their plans and put together a structured strategy that we can share with the advisor as they incorporate it into their estate and financial plans. I have some that are a part of the conversation. They might be a part of the initial meeting, or if we're thinking through something a little bit more complex, they will be with us all the way through, the conversation if we're accepting more complex assets, for example. So I really leave it to my advisor in the best way, because you all know your clients, right? And you know what, if they're comfortable just going on, contacting us on their own, or whether it's something to where we need to all partner together and sit at the table and plan accordingly. And so I really do trust our advisors to kind of help us lead that relationship with their client.
Mhm. And I find like some people are motivated by the tax strategies and then they become more connected with the cause. And some people are really connected to the cause and then discover that, there are more sort of financially efficient ways to do that. But I think really when they go hand in hand is where the value comes in and like the meaningfulness comes in. So
Yeah.
for donors who want to go beyond just their financial contributions, are there ways they can get involved with the community? Like I think you have like giving circles or site visits. Do you do that as well?
Yeah, we have some donors who have come together and they've put together giving circles based on certain initiatives. And so if we have a donor that comes to us and say, hey, I really want to be a part of supporting arts in Montgomery County, for example, we know of a giving circle, that's where their focus is. And we are able to make that connection to see if they want to be a part of that giving circle. Or for instance, of course, we do our own grant making. We do our own discretionary grant making in our regional footprint. And so we allow our donors and our advisors to participate in what we call our sharing committees. And those committees normally have a pool of funds to where they are able to learn from nonprofits that are in the community. And they're able to work together as a cohort to be able to make grant recommendations to support nonprofits in our local community. So it gives you kind of a behind the scenes feel of how to do grant making in the region. And so oftentimes we have that opportunity for our fund holders to do that, our advisors to participate as well, be like having subject matter experts, depending on the areas in which we're supporting. But it's a great opportunity for donors to see nonprofits that are in the region doing the work. And we've had donors that have gone on and created their own relationships with the nonprofits that have gone through our sharing committee and created their own relationships with those nonprofits.
Amazing. Amazing. So what else would you like to tell the listeners about the foundation? Maybe some stories of how people got involved.
Sure. So one client story that I can think of that's been really great is that I actually met them because they wanted to set out their philanthropic legacy with us. And so they were interested in setting up a scholarship fund for graduate students. And it's laid out supporting graduate students in law, medicine, engineering, business. But in having this conversation, with this particular donor, they actually said, well, Tiffany, we have our RMD that'll be coming up soon, our required minimum distribution, and we want to take advantage of a qualified charitable distribution. And now that we're thinking about it, we set out these plans for our legacy, but we really would love to see what this looks like now, experience the impact now, and how, the process would work, after we go. And so we were actually able to set up a scholarship fund for them that's being funded by their qualified charitable distribution or RMD. And so now we actually were just able to award their first grants to support 2 graduate students that just went out this past spring. So they're actually able to see it in person and see the impact that they're making in these students' lives that ultimately may not have had the funding to think that they could continue their education past undergrad, but to go into these fields that they, that cost money, to be able to go to graduate school and fund those for the time they need to go. So now these students have support that they didn't imagine they would have.
Amazing. Wonderful. How can people get started if they're interested?
You can just give me a call, and we're always happy. I always say it's free to talk to me. It's free to, be able to have a conversation about philanthropy. I love it. That's why I work in this area. I love talking to donors. I love hearing about their life, about their family, around why certain charities are important to them. They can call us anytime to be able to at least think through what it's like. And there's no, it's a consultation around what, a philanthropic plan could look like and if the community foundation could be helpful. It may not always be the choice, but we're there to be able to have the conversation to see if we could be. So we're always happy to do that. And so whether that's advisors that connect us and introduce us, whether they give them our contact information and they can reach out to us on their own at their own leisure, that is perfectly fine. We also have a resource on our website. So you can always go to the Greater Washington Community Foundation. It's thecommunityfoundation.org. And we
You were
excited that we had that.
you've got the domain.
We do. It is thecommunityfoundation.org. There's always one pages around the services that we offer from donors who have private foundations who no longer want private foundations and one that, goes out to donor advised funds, for example, or even separately managed funds. That's one thing that we haven't yet touched on. And a separately managed fund, in essence, is that oftentimes as advisors, you all are connected with your clients. You're a part of their family. You've been with them for years, oftentimes. And they trust you all. And so oftentimes we might have a donor who comes to us and say, I want you all to work with me on the philanthropic aspects, but can I keep my investment advisor on the fund? And so we have an opportunity for the fund has to have at least $500,000 minimum. Then we can have a separately managed advisor on that fund. So you can keep your investment advisor that you have as long as they follow our IPS or our investment policy statement. So that's also an option for our advisors as well.
Right. Wonderful. So just give you a call and have a conversation.
Yeah, give us a call and we'll have the conversation.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much for all this amazing information. And thank you for being a guest.
Of course. It's my pleasure.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.